So you know the song Should I Stay or Should I Go by The Clash? Well, that's how I'm feeling right now about the Cleveland Browns. Why? Because they just parted ways with general manager John Dorsey after 2 seasons. This comes a day after they fired head coach Freddie Kitchens. So now the Browns are left without a head coach, left without a general manager. And this is nothing new for the Browns, because it seems like after 2 years, if they don't like what the coach is doing or what the general manager is doing, they get the chopping block. Cut. And it just, right now, the owners of the Browns, Jimmy and Dee Haslam, I honestly don't know if they care about creating a winning team. I really don't know. They haven't shown me anything to signal, yes, we want to bring a winning team to Cleveland. We want to bring a Super Bowl to Cleveland. I haven't seen that. I really haven't. They don't give the head coach or the general manager very much time to really do anything. I mean, look at New Orleans, look at New England, look at Baltimore, Pittsburgh. What do Green Bay? Well, no, not Green Bay really. No, you could still include Green Bay, even though they have a new head coach. What do all these teams have in common? They've kept their head coach for a long time. They've kept their general managers, and they've developed their quarterback. They developed their offense around their quarterback's strengths. They got players that fit with the offense and all that. And look, New Orleans has won a Super Bowl. Pittsburgh has won 6. And they've won 2 with Mike Tom, or the Steelers have won a Super Bowl with Mike Tomlin, but have been to 2. Green Bay won 1 with Mike McCarthy. Hopefully he's the next head coach of the Browns, but we'll see. Baltimore has been to a Super Bowl and won it with John Harbaugh, and I think they will win the Super Bowl this year. Hopefully they will beat San Francisco again, but we'll see. New England, they've stayed with Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, and they have 6 Super Bowls, although I don't believe all 6 of those Super Bowls are legitimate because of cheating, but that's neither here nor there. But all the franchises I just mentioned, New Orleans, Green Bay, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, they are all stable franchises. They've stayed with the same general manager mostly. They've stayed under the same head coach. And yeah, the hot seat has been there for some of these teams, head coaches, but those head coaches who were under the hot seat managed to power through that adversity and develop the team. For some reason, the Browns can't do that. I don't know why. Here's what I don't understand. After 2 years, the Haslams are like, oh, we're not seeing progress. Cut. You're gone, general manager. You're gone, head coach. Now, with Freddie Kitchens, he only lasted a year, but I understand why he was fired. I mean, there were way too many boneheaded coaching errors made. I mean, you're penalized 18 times in one game for, I believe it was over 200 yards. You run a draw play on 4th and 9 against the Rams. You accept a penalty against New England, which I think cost you the game. You challenge a play against Seattle right when your quarterback is throwing a touchdown. I could go on, but those are the ones I can think of. Oh, and you get beat not once, but twice by a third-string quarterback, both on the road, Brandon Allen and Duck Hodges. Although you could say Duck Hodges is like the Steelers' fourth-string quarterback. Whatever. But so I get why Kitchens was fired, and I'm not surprised. I am surprised that Dorsey and the Browns parted ways, though. But here's something interesting. From what I've seen of the Kansas City Chiefs, yes, Dorsey drafted Mahomes and Tyreek Hill and several of the other Chiefs players. But what's interesting is, while he was the GM, it didn't seem like the Chiefs were really going anywhere. They were kind of stuck. But once Dorsey left, Kansas City turned into who they are now. So it is interesting. But do I expect the same thing out of the Browns like with Kansas City? No, because this will now be Baker Mayfield's fourth head coach in just his second year as a quarterback. And he was the number 1 overall pick. Now, based on last year, I was saying that the 2018 first-round quarterback class, besides Josh Rosen, was doing well. Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson. After the second year, Baker Mayfield's taken a step back. I would say Sam Darnold has taken a step back. The only quarterbacks who have progressed are Lamar Jackson, who's going to win MVP without a doubt, and Josh Allen. He led the Bills to the playoffs, and the Buffalo was threatening to take the AFC East over New England. But the Patriots resorted to gadget plays and running plays with a linebacker as a fullback. Although I do think Tennessee is going to go into New England and beat the Patriots. You know, this is the first time since 2009 or something that the Patriots have played on Wild Card Weekend. And here's the other interesting thing. When they have had to play on Wild Card Weekend, they have 0 Super Bowl appearances and thus 0 Super Bowl victories. When they have a first round bye, 9 Super Bowl appearances and 6 Super Bowl victories. Although again, as I said a little bit earlier in this video, I don't know how many of those Super Bowl championships are legitimate. Because again, I believe the Patriots are cheaters. But that's neither here nor there. But I'm honestly thinking about maybe abandoning the Browns. Because they go through head coaches and quarterbacks and general managers quick. Like 2 years. Oh, you didn't do a good job. Bye, general manager. Bye, head coach. Oh, you didn't do well as the starting quarterback for the Browns this 1 year. Okay, we have the number 1 pick. We're going to go draft a quarterback. Or, oh, it's been 3 years. You haven't done anything as our starting quarterback. Guess what? We're going to release you and draft another quarterback. It's so frustrating. I'm serious. I'm somewhat considering abandoning the Browns and choosing a new AFC team. I really am. I mean, they haven't convinced me that they're about winning. They haven't. I mean, you had a good ending to the season last year. 7-8-1. And what do you follow that up with? 6-10. And you could have hired a head coach like Mike McCarthy, Ron Rivera, although not anymore because Ron Rivera is expected to sign a contract with Washington. Again, I choose not to say Washington's team name because I believe their team name and their logo is racist, stereotypical, and discriminatory. So yeah, I choose to say Washington. I hope you can respect that. But yeah, Ron Rivera is going to Washington. Now, there are reports that the Browns are interested in hiring Patriots offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels as the head coach. And that could be why they parted ways with John Dorsey. Because I heard that Dorsey and McDaniels probably wouldn't get along. But here's my issue with McDaniels. He had a agreement with the Indianapolis Colts to become their head coach. But then, maybe a few days later, he comes out and goes, nope, I'm backing out. I'm going to stay with the Patriots. And that just rubs me the wrong way. You made the commitment to become the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts. You have to stay with your commitment. But he didn't. And the Colts ended up hiring Frank Reich. And that's turned out to be the right decision because they went to the playoffs, beat the Houston Texans, although that's nothing really impressive because the Texans seem to fall apart when they make it to the playoffs, and I think they will do that again this year because I believe Buffalo will go into Houston and beat the Texans, although J.J. Watt's expected to play in that game, but don't know how healthy he's going to be, so we'll see. But, you go out in the offseason, get Odell Beckham Jr., you trade for Olivier Vernon, and you hire your interim offensive coordinator because of his connection with Baker Mayfield. And there's all this hype. My only expectations for the Browns this season was that they win the AFC North. I mean, there were people saying, the Browns are going to go to the Super Bowl and, all of this and that. I mean, I'm not one of those crazy fans. My only expectation for them was to win the AFC North. And they didn't even come close. They finished in third place with a record of 6-10. They got swept by the NFC West this season, losing at home against the Rams, losing at San Francisco, losing at home against Seattle, and losing at Arizona. They lost both games against the two teams who finished in third place, the Tennessee Titans, 43-13, and losing to the Denver Broncos. I believe it was 24-18, something like that. They lost against the Seahawks 32-28. They lost against the 49ers 31-3. They lost against the Rams 20-13, and I don't quite remember the score of the Browns-Cardinals game. Hold on one second. Hey Siri, what was the score of the Cleveland Browns-Arizona Cardinals game?
Arizona beat Cleveland by a score of 38-24 on December 15th, 2000.
And Arizona won 38-24. Although the Browns did split with the AFC East because they beat the Jets week 2, 23-3. They lost to the Patriots 27-13, I believe it was. They beat the Bills 19-16. And they beat the Dolphins, I believe it was 44-20 something. Let me double check. Hey Siri, What was the score of the Miami Dolphins-Cleveland Browns game?
The Browns bested the Dolphins.
The Browns beat the Dolphins 41-24. And they beat all three teams in the AFC North at least once. But they finished with a record of 3-3 against the AFC North because they lost to the Bengals in Week 17. That's pretty pathetic. So, I mean, you got swept by the NFC West. You got swept by both third-place finishers. Split with the AFC East. Exactly 500 against your division. No playoffs. When you had all the expectations on your shoulders. Yeah, I understand why Freddie Kitchens got fired. And also, when Freddie Kitchens was the interim offensive coordinator last year, you saw these great play designs and, deep passes and, all this and that. And this season, you didn't see anything creative. I didn't see any creative play design. I didn't see any, big passes or... I really saw nothing. Baker Mayfield, I think, regressed. And I know I've said this once, but I will say it again. My biggest problem with Baker Mayfield is that when a pass play is called, he seems to be a one-read quarterback where he will lock into one receiver running a route and not look at any of the other receivers. For example, he might call for a deep pass for a double move by Odell Beckham Jr. And he only looks at Odell Beckham Jr. when he might have Jarvis Landry coming on a slant route, wide open. But he doesn't look at Landry. He only looks at Odell Beckham Jr. And here's my other problem with the Browns. They were a confused offense. Okay, I get it. Based on your opponent's defensive weakness, you might want to rely on the run or pass more. But still, look at a team like Baltimore. They found their offensive identity. They are a run-first team. And look at them. They designed their offense to be a run-first team, and they built their pass game off of it. Tennessee, same thing. They designed their team to be a run-first offense, and they built their passing game off of it. Why didn't the Browns do that? This team is designed to be a power running team, and yet, for some reason, they never seem to establish the running game. They never stayed with an offense. One week they would come out, oh, we're a run-first team. Okay, this is working. Next week, nope, we're a passing team. Again, week 6 against Seattle, using the run game to set up the quick passing game, it was working in the first half. Second half, for some reason, we went completely away from it. I wish I could tell you why, but I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, and my other problem is there are so many big personalities on this team, and the team is young. There's no veteran leadership on the Browns to keep them in line. So, yeah, I have a lot of issues with the Browns. And again, I'm seriously considering abandoning this team because this is just getting ridiculous. Next year they play the NFC East. They'll be home against Philadelphia, home against Washington, at Dallas, at the Giants. They play the AFC South, so they'll be home for Indianapolis, home for Houston, at Jacksonville, and at Tennessee. And since the Oakland Raiders and New York Jets both finished in third place, the Browns will be hosting home against the Oakland Raiders and at the New York Jets. So, yeah. And then, of course, the AFC North. So, home against Cincinnati, home against Baltimore, home against Pittsburgh, at Cincinnati, at Baltimore, at Pittsburgh. Those are our opponents, and where we will be playing them. Don't know the time or date yet. That will happen when the schedule gets released, which will happen after the Super Bowl, so that the Super Bowl winner can host the first game of the season. I love that the NFL does that. I love that the NBA does that. I love that the NHL does that. All three of those leagues wait until the championship is over so that whoever wins the Stanley Cup or the Larry O'Brien Trophy or the Lombardi Trophy can have the first game at home so that they can raise their championship banner, receive their rings, celebrate with the fans. But does Major League Baseball do that? No! And it's fucking stupid. The Major League Baseball releases their schedule while releases next season's schedule while the current season is happening, usually around September. And the Nationals won the World Series, but I don't think they are hosting their first game. I think they're on the road. Let me check, because I want to make sure I'm right about that. Let's go to Washington. Their first two series are at the Mets and at the Marlins. What? They won the World Series, and yet they have to start the season on the road. Again, that is fucking stupid. It makes no sense. It really doesn't. So, yeah. So the other reason I want to make this video is I want to get into the UFC, actually. And the UFC has done something interesting. For UFC 244, UFC 245, and UFC 246, the same division has been the main event. The welterweight division, 170 pounds. The main event for UFC 244 was Jorge Masvidal against Nate Diaz for the BMF belt, otherwise known as the baddest motherfucker belt, at Madison Square Garden. The main event for UFC 245 was Kamaru Usman against Colby Covington for the welterweight championship at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, Nevada. And the main event for UFC 246 will be Conor McGregor making his octagon return against Donald Cowboy Cerrone, once again at welterweight, at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. I think it's very interesting that the UFC is making the same division the main event for 3 straight pay-per-views. I don't know. I like it, but I don't understand it. You could have made although Israel Adesanya is out, but you could have done I don't know. You could have made UFC 246 be like Stipe Miocic against Daniel Cormier 3 for the heavyweight belt. Or you could have done Henry Cejudo against somebody for the bantamweight belt. For one of those 3, I love that for UFC 245 there were 3 title fights. Kamaru Usman won by TKO against Colby Covington late in the 5th round to retain the welterweight championship. Alexander Volkanovski won by decision against Max Holloway to win the UFC featherweight belt, although according to Dana White, there is supposedly going to be an immediate rematch in Australia, most likely on the same card as Israel Adesanya against Paulo Costa for the middleweight belt. So that will be the main event, and Volkanovski against Holloway 2 will be the co-main event. And then Amanda Nunes defeated Germaine de Randamie, I believe it was by decision, to retain the bantamweight belt. And for her next title defense, she wants to move up to featherweight and defend that belt. Although there's no contenders at featherweight. So, I don't know. So, it's interesting. But, again, I don't get why the UFC has made the welterweight division the main event for 3 straight pay-per-views. Especially since Conor McGregor isn't a welterweight. He's a lightweight. And what I'm hoping is that McGregor is not going to invade a 3rd division to try and win a 3rd belt. Because he started as a featherweight and eventually worked up to knock out champion Jose Aldo in 13 seconds in the main event of UFC 194. But did he defend the featherweight belt? No. He immediately tried to challenge for the lightweight belt against Rafael Dos Anjos. But Dos Anjos got hurt, so Nate Diaz stepped in, and Diaz could not make the lightweight limit of 155 pounds, and thus it became a welterweight bout at 170 pounds. Of course, Diaz would go on to submit Conor McGregor, and they ran it back at UFC 202. Again, it was a welterweight main event. And McGregor won by majority decision because he won on one judge's scorecard. It was tied on the second judge's scorecard, and McGregor won on the third judge's scorecard. Thus, a majority decision. So, I hope McGregor does not, if he wins against Cowboy Cerrone, which I expect him to do, I hope that he goes back down to lightweight, that he doesn't try and call out one of the top contenders in the welterweight division like Jorge Masvidal, but I think he will. And I'm hoping that he doesn't eventually try to challenge Kamaru Usman for the welterweight belt. I will be very disappointed and annoyed if he does. Because I love watching McGregor. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I don't want him invading 3 different weight divisions. That's ridiculous. I mean, John Jones is a superstar, but you don't see him invading the heavyweight bout or division, although he has talked about moving up to heavyweight to challenge Stipe Miocic. But I think Miocic will face Cormier first in a trilogy fight, which is absolutely necessary because Cormier won the first fight with a lucky punch, and then Miocic came back and won the second fight thanks to an in-octagon adjustment of going to body shots, which opened up headshots, and eventually Miocic was able to knock out Cormier. Thus, it's tied 1-1. There needs to be a tiebreaker. And again, I pushed hard for this. The Octagon needs to come back to Cleveland. What do I have to do? I get it. I'm just one person. But until the Octagon returns to Cleveland at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, I will keep saying it in my YouTube videos. I don't care. I want the Octagon to come back to Cleveland. I was at UFC 203 when the Octagon was here in Cleveland. when Stipe was defending the heavyweight belt against Alistair Overeem. And it was amazing. The crowd was really into it. And I think that was partially because Stipe was fighting. But even for the other fights, the crowd was really into it. And the Octagon is going to Columbus for a heavyweight bout. Francis Ngannou against Rosenstruck. I forget his first name. And Ohio native Cody Garbrandt will be fighting on that card in the co-main event. So why are you bringing the Octagon to Columbus but not to Cleveland? It really annoys me. I know it shouldn't annoy me, but it does. I'm a passionate UFC fan. What can I say? And speaking of passion, you probably saw that I posted 3 videos from the Cleveland Classic. Oh my God. It was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But I think they got something wrong. Because the first game was Ohio State against West Virginia. A top 20 showdown. The crowd was about 16,000 people. So about 3,000 people short of a sellout. And based on the crowd noise, it seemed like it was about 50-50 in terms of Ohio State fans and West Virginia fans. And the game started off slow. It took about 2 minutes before either team scored. And especially in the second half, momentum was swinging like a pendulum. And what was cool was, as momentum was shifting, each fan base became more boisterous. Like when West Virginia had the momentum, you would hear the West Virginia fans going, "Let's go Mountaineers, let's go Mountaineers." And then when Ohio State started to take momentum back, you would start hearing Buckeye fans go, "Let's go Bucks," and the classic chant of OHIO. Again, not an Ohio State fan. I was just doing that cheer because that's what the Ohio State fans were doing at the game. I'm still a Penn State fan. However, I am trying to decide what Big 12 basketball team should I root for. I don't care about Big 12 football. Big 12 basketball is exciting. It's so much fun. I would put it as maybe the top basketball conference of the Power 5, although maybe I would put ACC ahead of them. I don't know. Because in the Big 12, you got Kansas, Baylor, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Texas occasionally. Although in the ACC, you have North Carolina, Duke, Virginia, Louisville, Syracuse occasionally. In the SEC, you have Florida, Kentucky, Auburn now. I don't really know who else in terms of the SEC for college basketball. In the Big Ten, you have Ohio State, Michigan, Michigan State, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. Illinois seems to be good at college basketball all of a sudden. Penn State occasionally. Rutgers doesn't even belong in the Big Ten. I don't know why the Big Ten added them. Rutgers should get kicked out of the Big Ten. Oh, I forgot Maryland. Maryland's amazing to watch in college basketball. They create so many good games. Yeah. Don't really know anybody in the SEC or Pac-12 other than Oregon and Washington. But in like the Big East, you have Villanova, Providence, Seton Hall, Xavier. Who else? Villanova, go Cats, put up your V. Providence, Xavier, Seton Hall, Georgetown, DePaul. That's all I can think of. And in the American, you have UConn, Cincinnati, Wichita State. Yeah, college. So let me say this. In terms of the actual game itself, I enjoy the NBA and NFL more. But in terms of atmosphere, I love college basketball and college football so much better. Because with college basketball and college football, you have the student section, you have the marching bands, the mascots. It's so much fun. And it was one of the coolest atmospheres I have ever been a part of. I wasn't really rooting for either team between Ohio State and West Virginia, but it was so much fun. Like, oh my God. It was, wow. I will never forget it. And then the second game was Marshall against Duquesne. It felt like a balloon got popped and all the air got sucked out of the building. Because after West Virginia knocked off Ohio State 67-59, which I wish college basketball was 4 quarters instead of 2 halves. Because, yeah, the games are competitive with 2 halves, but they're very low scoring. Like, the score at halftime was Ohio State, West Virginia was 37-31. Like, in the NBA, that's like mid-second quarter. And 67-59 would be like maybe early third quarter, early third quarter. Not the final score. So, yeah, with 2 halves, you get very competitive games. I agree. But I just don't like how low scoring of games they are. So, I wish they would change it to 4 quarters. But if the NCAA never changes it, I'm fine with that too. But for Marshall Duquesne, pretty much everybody left. There was only like 3,000 people left, I would say. And there was a small contingency of Marshall fans, but other than that, there was no crowd energy. There was nothing. I mean, my friend and I started making fun of the game because it was just so bad. And Marshall blew out Duquesne. It wasn't even fun. It wasn't even competitive. So if Cleveland does something like this again next year, either number 1, have 2 really big matchups like Ohio State, West Virginia, and then follow that up with another big game. I don't know. Let's say Duke and Kentucky, for example. Or you if you're going to do like a big matchup and then a little matchup, put the little matchup first and make the big matchup be the main event. So I think they did screw that part up. But yeah. Again, going back to the Browns, I honestly wish I could get a giant crane, put a circus tent on the hook, take it to First Energy Stadium, and put the circus tent over First Energy Stadium, and then go into the Browns equipment room, take all the helmets, paint them white, and put a clown's face on them. Because that's how bad the Browns are. They are a circus. I mean, again, I said this once earlier in the video, and I'll say it again. As of right now, I don't think the Haslams care about winning or making the Browns a competitive team. They just want to own the Browns and be like, okay, we own the Browns. Oh, you didn't do good enough. You're gone. You didn't do good enough. You're gone. Again, I'm not sure. Should I stay a Browns fan or should I leave and go to a different fan base? I have the Seattle Seahawks. They will always be my favorite NFC team. But should I stay a Browns fan or should I choose a different AFC team? I'm honestly contemplating that. I mean, until the Browns show me that they're committed to winning and they're committed to, staying with a head coach and they're committed to developing a quarterback, they're a joke to me. They're a joke. I mean, if I was a potential head coach, I wouldn't want to coach for the Browns. Then again, I wouldn't want to coach for the Dallas Cowboys either because of one name, Jerry Jones. He's both the owner and the general manager, but he lets his ego get in the way too much. Like, you know, the Cowboys are built to be a run-first team. You paid Zeke Elliott $90 million, $50 million guaranteed. Your offensive line is designed to be, to be a run-first offensive line. And yet, you come out passing it against the Eagles. And in the most crucial part of the game, you have the guy you traded a first-round pick for, Amari Cooper, on the sidelines. What? If I'm Dak Prescott, and I'm trying to get paid with a big contract, I'm calling a timeout, and I'm going to Jason Garrett and going, I need Amari Cooper on the field. He is my top receiver. I want him on the field. But Dak Prescott has not shown that leadership capability. Then again, neither has Baker Mayfield. I mean, first off, in the offseason, Baker Mayfield was talking about Daniel Jones. Why? And then in the post-game press conference against the Bengals, he's calling out the training staff about Odell Beckham Jr. Yeah. And he's just focusing on the little thing, on the outside stuff. Like, he's saying stuff about, Colin Cowherd shouldn't say this stuff about me, or, I mean, I think I saw more insurance commercials with Baker Mayfield in it than he had wins. What? I don't see him as a leader. I don't. He's got to prove it to me. But, yeah. Going back to the Cowboys, though. Again, you are Dak Prescott. You are trying to get paid. You are trying to show the Cowboys that you deserve a $40 million contract. And you don't try and get Amari Cooper, your top receiver, on the field for the most crucial play of the game. Makes no sense. But you know what else doesn't make sense? NFL officiating. I watched the 49ers Seahawks game, obviously, because I'm a huge Seahawks fan. And that was clearly pass interference. I don't know what the refs were looking at. What's the point of having the ability to review interference if you're not going to review it? I mean, that was clearly pass interference, and the Seahawks weren't able to challenge it because I believe it was under 2 minutes when it happened, and coaches aren't allowed to challenge in the last 2 minutes. Yeah. And yeah, I agree that wasn't a touchdown. That was a great play by the San Francisco defender. But if Seattle hadn't been called for the delay of game penalty, which that wasn't the official's fault. I'm not blaming the refs for that. I don't know what the Seahawks were doing on that, but they were close enough to the end zone where if they hadn't been called for the delay of game, they could have just gone, here you go, Marshawn Lynch, run into the end zone. Unlike what they did in Super Bowl 49. I will never be able to erase that horrible memory from my mind. But I think I've heard that the reason the Seahawks did that was because they wanted Russell Wilson to win Super Bowl MVP, which I think is total bullshit. Why would you do that? Why would you make a call to try and make your quarterback the MVP? Why not make the call that will win you the Super Bowl? Although my theory is the reason the Seahawks threw it was because they had just done a run play, and so they were expecting the Patriots to be in a run defense, So they wanted to try and throw him off with a pass. And it almost worked. Malcolm Butler was just in the right place at the right time to make that play. But I bet you 9 out of 10 times that play works. Unfortunately, the one time it doesn't came in the Super Bowl. But was that Super Bowl legitimate to me? No. Why? Because of Deflategate. And Tom Brady should have stayed suspended for 6 games that season, not 4. But the NFL got scared, so they were like, okay, Tom Brady, we'll reduce your Super Bowl or suspension by 2 games. And of course, his first game back from suspension was against the Browns in Cleveland, and the Patriots promptly destroyed the Browns. What a surprise. Not. So yeah. I don't know if I should stay a Browns fan. I really don't. So that's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, punch that like button like a UFC fighter and punch that subscribe button. Until next year, this is Unger to the Max signing off with a salute to you. Happy New Year. I will see you in 2020. I hope this was a great decade for you because it was for me. Yeah.